Welcome to the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast. Jacob Dahlin, your humble host here. Today we're doing this little mini series on mental toughness, but I want to welcome our newest guest, Shawnee Harlee from British Columbia. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, let's go. Let's do this.
Yeah, so let's start with the geographical segment. Where in British Columbia are you from?
Right in the middle, about 4 hours east of Vancouver in the beautiful Okanagan Valley. I call Kelowna my home.
Okay, a little bit of a hockey history there. I believe our previous guest, Dion Antison, who was coaching with Notre Dame Hounds in Saskatchewan, actually grew up in Kelowna. And so, we've done enough of these episodes now that you start having commonalities and those type of things. But main topic today, we're going to talk about mental toughness. As you see, for you that are watching on the YouTube side, Shawnee's kind of big in the mental toughness training and has been for a while. We'll talk about your background, and we want to start there, and then we want to, this is the season now that kids or players, men and women, boys and girls, are trying to make a team, and then they're trying to make an impact on the team as they are. We've had a lot of kids that are going to main camps, and the experience of going to a pre-draft or a main camp and then a training camp, and they're preparing their bodies right now, and they're working out, and they're trying to get as big and strong and fast as they can. But how many of them are actually training their mind, and how do you do that? And so we'll talk about that. What do you think about that?
I can't wait. It's such a great topic, especially the part of our bodies are important to train, our minds are important to train, but how come no one's training the mind? That's what I find so fascinating.
Well,
So
we are. We're
okay.
spending hours and hours on Xbox.
Oh,
So,
good point.
yeah, so we're training. We're just focused perhaps in a maybe an area that won't lead to as much success. But anyway, so let's start off with this. You are not a hockey player per se, right?
Well, yes, I am.
You're Canadian and you played on the ponds. That makes you
Well, when
automatically
you
qualified.
so many people when you live in Canada, I mean, I grew up playing on the ponds in the backyard with my brothers and the neighbor kids. So I think that counts as a hockey player.
That's right. And are you a fan?
I'm a fan. I'm a fan of sports in general.
Yeah.
Um, where the Stanley Cup playoffs are all over the map, and oh yeah, a Canadian team is going to be playing in the Stanley Cup Finals. FYI, I don't need to tell you that; you already know. Um, so am I a fan? I mean, if you give it like there's a scale, right? Like there's hardcore, and then there's people that aren't interested. I would be more in the middle. I'm not a hardcore fan, but I'm a fan of sport
Yeah.
and watching these guys. Isn't playoff hockey unbelievable awesome?
Yeah. There's nothing like it. And you have this kind of, oh no, now we're getting into the Stanley Cup. It's been so nice when we've had a game every night, and it's not at 10 o'clock.
Right.
It's at 8 p.m. our time. I'm on the Eastern time zone. I know you're on Pacific, but you can actually watch something every night. Um but now we're also this, ooh, that means we're so close to the end of it, and we're not going to have hockey overnight every night. So I'm a fan too. Short story about, so my mom still lives in Sweden, and it's so funny. She is 78, I believe. Every time I talk, I'm like, what are you watching on TV? I'm sure it's some kind of sport, and it doesn't matter if it could be equestrian, it could be, it doesn't matter. Some type of sport is on, and she's going to be watching. So
Love
so
it.
I come from a sport was really, really important all the time. So I'm a sports fan too. But my point about saying that is that you're not necessarily a hockey player. You didn't play competitive hockey. You're a basketball player and have been a coach for how many years?
28. That's
Yeah.
close.
And all the way up to the pinnacle, you've been as an assistant coach to the Olympics twice.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, there's very few people that have been involved as long as you can't have and at the level that you have. And coaching is coaching. It just depends a little bit on in which area. So, but growing up in how was it for you? So did you go through as a multi-sport athlete?
I did, because I grew up in a small town in a small school, and I didn't even know that there was such thing as not a multi-sport athlete. I mean, you right, when there's a small number of students in the school, the same people play every sport. And I didn't even know it at the time, but how much of an advantage, now that I'm in my adult years, how much of an advantage it was being a multi-sport athlete.
Yeah. How, at what point did you start to specialize?
I don't think I did. Uh, I played all the sports right up until I graduated. Perhaps, if compared to how we specialize today, it wasn't specialized. In the summers, I went to basketball camps. So I guess you would call that was how I specialized. But I played all the sports right through until I graduated high school.
And then what about university? Did you play one sport?
I did. I played basketball only in
Only in that
university.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it's similar now. Of course, hockey is a little bit different because, for those, I have to explain this all the time for non-hockey people about juniors. My son's 19 and most of his buddies have already been in college for a year and they're like, "Oh, where's he going to school?" I said, "Well, he's not." So why not? Well, he's playing hockey. I was, well, is he playing in college? So, well, no, he's playing juniors.
Yeah.
And but in growing up in Canada playing high school or playing basketball in college, I'm assuming you went straight from high school into college or university.
Right. Right. I mean, hockey is one of the few sports that does it the other way around.
Yeah.
So, yes, I went right from high school to collegiate basketball.
Yeah. So, and how long did you end up talk about your college? Because I want to segue that into kind of where your focus is now. How long did you play, and when did you get into coaching?
I played 3 years of college collegiate basketball. I wanted to play longer, but I got cut.
Okay.
And at the time, I thought the world was ending. And I thought it was so unfair. Like, couldn't the coach see how amazing I was?
Yeah.
But when I look back on it, I was damn lucky that I even played for 3 years. Again, I was from a small town. I wasn't recruited. I made the team as a walk-on. So, like, think about that. You're not the superstar, and I got to play 3 years on a really, really successful team. Oh, actually, let's call it what it is. I was on the bench
Yeah.
for 3 years on a really successful team, and then I got cut. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was never going to be good enough. I didn't know it. Right when you're young, your self-awareness is low. You think you're some big whoopee wow, and you're actually not. And getting cut was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it set me on the path for my true calling, which ended up being coaching.
Well, let me stop you right there. What's good enough? When you say I was never going to be good enough, for what? At the time, I mean, there was not professional basketball uh per se, right? For a female.
Right. Good enough for me at that time meant being able to be part of the roster of 12. And I mean, we all know at the collegiate level, the goal is to win. Like, you have to win, or the coach gets fired. And when you have people sitting on your bench, it's not bad in year one, perhaps not in year two, but when you've got older players sitting, I mean, when I look back now,
Yeah.
successful teams don't have older players sitting on the bench. You have to turn it over and get the younger players coming. And so I'm glad I got to play 3 years. I
Yeah.
was good enough to be anything other than a role player who came off the bench.
Yeah. So you graduated college. Did you go into coaching right away, or did you go in the work career for a while and then come back?
Oh man, that's a good question. I can't remember. And yes, I can. Yes. Now I remember. That was a while ago. So here's what's cool. The coach that cut me, after I was done being mad at her, which took me a while, she said to me, have you ever thought about going into coaching? I'm like, no, I'm an athlete. Can't you tell? And she was the one that said, I think there's something there. So I started running all of her basketball camps. Then she said, you really should focus on this. So what I did is, after I graduated university, I went to the National Coaching Institute in Canada, in British Columbia.
Okay.
And the coach that cut me, the National Coaching Institute was part of our campus. And so the coach that cut me, I ended up mentoring, being mentored by her, apprenticing with her, because she was the most successful coach in our country at that time. So I'm like, wow, thank goodness you cut me. Thank goodness you saw something else in me that I was unable to see for myself. And then off I went.
Yeah. Well, I'm pulling up your timeline here on LinkedIn is a great way to kind of look at those things. And I see that you ended up on the educational. So did you go originally? Did you go to be a teacher, or did that kind of shape itself?
No, I did. That's what I graduated. My degree was in teaching, and
Yeah.
I actually taught for a year. And what I found is, like, it got in the way of my coaching. Like, I just wanted to spend time on the court doing individual sessions, planning tournaments and games and season plans. And then I'm like, oh damn it, I got to go to class and teach. I did love teaching, but I loved coaching more.
Yeah. And how long, I'm trying to see too then. So how long did you end up staying as a teacher until you became a full-time coach?
I think I only stayed teaching 1 year. Because I like, it just became so clear to me. Oh, I see where my passion, right? What am I spending all my time thinking about? Where did I want to put my energy? And it became so clear so quickly. It's like, oh my gosh, it's definitely coaching. And so I shifted really quickly out of teaching into, I want to be a full-time coach.
Yeah. And I'm looking here too. So, are you still coaching? I mean, you're coaching, but you're not necessarily coaching a team at this time.
That's right. I stopped coaching with our national team in 2017.
Okay. So, and then you kind of started because what I'm trying to figure out here is, at what point did you get into this thing of, you've got years of experience and applicable experience, and then you went into, so you're coaching players on a team, and at what point did you start uh, focusing on coaching teams specifically with mental toughness?
It became really obvious to me that there was something that was missing. in the traditional coaching. I remember as an athlete, and I was average in the context where I was competing, but thinking, looking back on it, it's like, man, I was missing mental toughness skills. Then I became a coach and I saw my athletes missing mental toughness skills, but I don't even think I used that word. And I didn't have the tools to help them. All I did was what most coaches do. Well, we need to do more drills.
Yep.
We need to do more training. We need to watch more video. I need to yell at them more, or whatever it is. But we never fixed the root problem. And what I saw happening over and over and over and over is on the biggest day, the biggest stage, the biggest moment of our season, of our life. Why do so many athletes underperform? Why do so many athletes choke? That absolutely fascinated me because I even saw it at the highest levels. I saw it at the Olympics. Biggest day, biggest stage of our lives. How come we cannot show up as our greatest self? What's stopping us? I didn't know, but I knew it had happened to me as an athlete. I knew it had happened to me as a coach, and I knew it happened to the athletes that I was coaching. And I didn't see anything out there that was helpful. And so I decided that this problem needs to be solved.
I would
So,
also let me flip it. So
okay.
I'm through. I am. I bet you've also seen the opposite, not just the person that is choking and that are not able to perform, but you've also seen players that you probably had that are stepping up to the plate and separating themselves, and that are so. Last night, Connor McDavid. So, uh, so this is recorded on the 3rd. So June 2nd for all Canadians. Hasn't been a Stanley Cup winner in a while, I believe, from Canada. But now you're in the final with Florida. But who stepped up the most was their best player, Connor McDavid, who at the biggest state, the best player in the world, and we can talk about Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux and all these guys that have, Sidney Crosby. When we're talking about hockey, he stepped up at the biggest stage and didn't choke. So I'm sure that you have seen players too that are not just not choking, but they are stepping up a level.
Without a doubt. And if we look, I mean, when you're looking at the pros, I mean, you're talking about the point. I mean, they're such, by the time they're at the pros, they are such a small percentage. And the amount of experiences they've had over time and the number of pressure of situations that they've been in. But if we back that up and we go more into the grassroots, we go into the teenage years.
Yeah.
Yes, there are athletes stepping up and performing well. But when I get to talk to them, I ask them, was that by design or was it by accident? And a lot of times at the younger levels, it was by accident. They're just like, I don't know, like I just had a good day. I just felt confident. Everything was working. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And then I'm thinking, you know what? Success should not be an accident.
Mm-hmm.
We should be able to plan for it. I think by the time you're Connor McDavid, he's got a really solid plan because he also was the guy on the same team that got eliminated earlier than they wanted. And I believe that was last season.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the differences by the time you're at that level? I would love to get in his head. I would
Well,
love to know what he was thinking.
He's really been working on his toe drag, right?
That's such a good point, isn't it? Because what I said was I would love to know what he was thinking. I didn't say I would love to know what he was working on the ice.
Yeah, exactly.
What's
Well,
happening in his mind? That's what I would love to know.
because I want to get to some of the application, but I want to let's set the stage too, because I wrote down just two words, and when we talk about mental toughness, you can use, I can get the dictionary in here, but two things. One came from your website, ShawneeHarlee.com, and it was talking about emotional intelligence. So that's one word. And then we want to use when we talk about mental toughness, what does it really mean? So you pick which one you want to start with, emotional intelligence or mental toughness, and we'll talk about the words and what do they mean to you.
In my opinion, and in my teaching, they're the same thing.
Okay.
I believe that if you want to have true mental toughness, you have to have emotional intelligence, because sport is a series of storms, and most of the storms are emotional. So what I believe mental toughness is the ability to acknowledge, understand, and manage how we feel. So I think emotional intelligence and mental toughness, they're the same. And in fact, when I work with athletes and I look at what is a differentiator, it's very rarely skill that's the differentiator. There's something that goes on in their mind that they either figured out by accident or they figured out by a plan. But if you think about what I said earlier, the biggest day, the biggest stage of our life, it's not like in hockey on the biggest day, the biggest stage of your life, all of a sudden you became a worse skater. Or all
Yeah.
of a sudden you'd be like, oh, I can't remember how to shoot the puck. No, the skills are still there. So what is it? What does pressure do to us? Why does pressure make us play worse sometimes when it isn't our skill set that decreases?
Yeah.
That's what I find fascinating.
And I do want to mention that, you currently work with not just not just with basketball players, but you do work with hockey players. People early on here, so in case people wondering why we're having a basketball coach on, right?
Yeah.
let's put that out there right away. So she kind of knows what she's talking about. But let me ask you that, because I'll put down some also some things in here about male versus female. Young versus old, and the third one, sports specific. When we're talking about emotional intelligence, we're talking about mental toughness. How much difference is there between young or older? Not young versus old, but if we're talking about a young player versus a third year player if we're talking about juniors as an example, or the age of 18-year-old versus 20-year-old, or 17 versus 19, how much a difference do you see between male and female? And how much have you seen the difference between when you work with a basketball player or a baseball player or a soccer player or a hockey player in this subject of emotional intelligence and mental toughness?
Well, the approach that I take, gender, age, experience, and the sport they play are not part of the equation. And I'll tell you why. When I work with a client and, you get the introductions done, who are you, how old are you, where do you play, et cetera, et cetera. And then I ask them, what's your dream goal? Because I want to figure out, where do you want to go with this thing that you're doing? And then I immediately ask them this question: what's your deepest fear? I don't think that question matters what your gender is, what sport you play, or how long that you've been doing it. I work with Olympians, I work with professional golfers, and when I ask, so we're talking the highest level, and I ask them what their deepest fear is, they haven't even freaking thought about it because they have suppressed it for so long. When I ask a 7-year-old what's their deepest fear, and they're like, with a little guidance, they can tell me. Because this is what I believe. Until we face our deepest fear, we will never be able to show up as our greatest self. So I start at the end and work backwards. What are you most afraid of? Because once I help them figure out what that is, I'm like, okay, now I know what my job is. My job is to help you face your deepest fears. And that is the exact opposite of what sport teaches us to do, because sport teaches us not to be afraid. And you're weak if you're
Hmm.
afraid.
So how does that put yourself in that position when, if you think back at your career, both as a player and as a coach? Because as a coach, you're also under the microscope and you are very much under pressure. It's just a different, you're not the one shooting the ball or shooting the puck. You live vicariously through your players. But what was your biggest fear? Have you analyzed that, or I'm sure you have.
Heck yeah. I didn't know it at the time. I think all of us are afraid of three things. This is coaches, parents, athletes. I think we're all afraid of three things. We're afraid of failure. We're afraid of success. And we're afraid of what people think. So you asked me when I was a coach, what was my deepest fear? Losing. But now I could have said that to you at the time, losing, but I didn't have the tools at the time to go underneath that. Now I do. It isn't losing that I was afraid of. I was afraid of what I thought people would think.
So they're all interrelated.
They're all related.
What about the success? And when you say, what are you afraid of success?
Oh man, you know what? I have a hockey player that I'm working with. He wants to play junior hockey. And I'm like, okay. Then I asked him this, why are you on the fourth line? And so then I start poking and I start asking questions. And the fourth line is where he feels most comfortable. He doesn't know this, but now he does, because we had this conversation, because that's where he hides. Because what he said, this is what he said. He basically said, people expect less of me when
Hmm.
I'm on the fourth line. Fear of success. Fear of success means, what if I kick ass? What if I'm the leading scorer? What if I get on the All-Star team? Then everyone's going to expect me to keep doing that, to keep repeating that. And what if I can't? So do you see it's a fear?
Yeah, and I can see certainly how it's all then tied into, I heard people saying, well, fake it till I make it, and these type of things, and they're kind of afraid of being found out that they're a fraud, so to speak, right? So let me lead into this, because I think this is an important thing. So I've coached for 10 years, and this and I just had Mike Hartman on, who played for the Stanley Cup winner with the Rangers. And we talked about this subject of self-actualization or self-awareness. And I used the word in that conversation about some players are delusional, meaning their self-image, how they view themselves is, I am this good. And or they're delusional also. They think they have poor self-confidence or self-esteem, and they see themselves, their self-image, as less than. And neither one is sometimes accurate. But how important is it for you when you're having a conversation with a mentee, as a mentor, as a coach and student, or coach and player? How important is it for you, for the other party, to have a um, true picture of who they really are?
It's critical. You
And how do
cannot.
and how do you and how do you create that?
Well, there's two ends. I think too much of myself. I think too little of myself. Both are defense mechanisms, by the
Okay.
way. And in my opinion, defense mechanisms are fear-based. And what I do is, you use the word self-actualization, I use self-awareness. It's the
Yep.
same thing,
Yep.
but it's the ability to look in the mirror truthfully and acknowledge what you see. And I actually have an athlete right now that his mom wants me to start working with him because this is what she said. His image of himself is so overinflated. But most of the athletes I work with, their image is underinflated. So your point is, well, what do we do about that?
Yep.
Because the concept is we have to increase self-awareness. Because if we don't increase self-awareness, how in the world are we supposed to do anything about ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Don't even know, right? We don't know what we don't know. The best way to increase self-awareness is to ask questions that cause self-reflection. So this athlete with this overinflated opinion, this is what I asked him. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you? And then he gives me a number. And then I asked this, on a scale of 1 to 10, what number would your coach give? On a scale of 1 to 10, what would your parents give? If there was a college coach watching your next game, would they offer you a scholarship? So do you see how every one of those questions makes him go inside? Now, it doesn't mean he's going to give a truthful answer because I can't control the answer that he has.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that we cannot successfully lie to ourselves in the long term. So these questions that cause self-reflection, and by the way, athletes of all ages that I work with are terrible out at this.
Mm-hmm.
They don't look inside because you know why? They get told. They're just robots and puppets. They get told what to do, what to think, and when to do it, and when to think it. So they are very unpracticed, if that's a word,
Mm-hmm.
underskilled with looking in the mirror and self-reflecting. And there's another reason we don't want to self-reflect. We might not like what we see. And I'm like, and that's the exact reason we need to do it. Because how in the hell are we ever supposed to like what we see if we don't figure out that we don't like what we see?
Yeah.
So self-awareness, in order to transform and step into our greatest self, if we don't have self-awareness, I don't know how you do it. Maybe you just get lucky.
Yeah. What about the goal setting? So you mentioned kind of the other part about what's your fears and what are your goals. When you talk about goals, you kind of I think you use kind of your goals and your dreams. So are you then talking about really when you talk to a new player that you're trying to get to know, are you looking for kind of the real far out goal, or are you really looking at the close goal?
You know, that's a good question. I would say that um, I would say that yes, I'm pausing because I had to think about what is it that I'm trying to get them to figure out and for me to help them figure out. I'm
Yep.
trying to figure out what's their why.
Okay.
Like why are you doing this?
And why not that? Right?
Right. Because if we don't know, when we get clear on our why, that's our motivator. It's like, oh, this is why I'm getting up at 5:30 for an 5:30 a.m. for an early morning skate, because this is what I want over here. This
Yeah.
is my why. So whether it's short-term goals or long-term goals, we have to get clarity on why we're doing this thing in the first place.
So if we take that, if we now focus in here on kind of the subject at hand, you got this 18-year-old, or let's use the 19-year-old junior player, 18, 19. They're trying to make it on a junior team. And there's lots and lots of teams out there, lots of different levels, and they're all having main camps right now. And in North America, in United States, it's the USHL. In Canada, it's going to be the WHL, the OHL, and the Q. But okay, not everybody's going to play at the USHL or Tier 1 or major juniors in Canada. So having But what you find is that there's lots and lots of players that they'll shoot at the moon. And clearly, it's not up to them on which team you're going to make. Right? You don't buy a ticket. The ticket is provided to you based on your abilities and your who you truly are. So the redeemable qualities are not what you think about yourself, it's what you perform, or someone's opinion of your performance or your potential performance, right? And what we talked about earlier is really making the team and then making an impact on the team, which is not getting cut, right? And actually playing and performing. So if we're talking about now the first part, making the team. So if you have a good self-image, and do you think it's bad for them to stretch? I'm trying to now make a team that it perhaps is above my ability. So if you're a youth player, maybe I'm now trying to play on a AAA team. If you are a junior player, I'm now trying to play Tier 1 USHL. But I'm really a AA player. I'm really a Tier 2 player. Is it bad for them to stretch with their goal and with their what they're actually trying for?
No, stretching is what they should be doing.
And why
But,
is that?
but, no, okay. Because, so here's another question I ask my clients all the time. So we're talking about, should I try out for this team? Should I
Yeah.
try this move in a game? Should I?
Yes.
I'm like, so then I ask them this: what would your courageous self do? The answer is obvious. When I ask them, what would your courageous self do? They like that thing. And I'm like, then why aren't you doing it? I'm like, it's because it's your fearful self that's grabbing the microphone. So take the microphone away from the voice of fear and hand it to the voice of courage. And then I would also say this: if you're going to stretch and try something that's going to be really, really hard, prepare to get cut. Because if you're going to stretch and say, I'm only going to stretch if the odds are in my favor, that's not a stretch.
No.
Not a stretch.
Right.
Sport's a gamble. A gamble means the outcome is not guaranteed. It takes courage to do something when the outcome is not guaranteed. And I'll put this quote in there as well, because we're talking about making a team or getting cut.
Yep.
The most dangerous player on the ice in a tryout situation is the one who's not afraid to get cut.
Yep. The guy that has nothing to lose.
Exactly.
Right?
That's right.
So,
But most of them are doing the opposite. They're
yeah.
all worried about getting cut. Well, what if you were the one that handed the microphone to the voice of courage? How would
Yeah.
you show up in that tryout?
Yeah. All right. So what about short-term goals? Okay, if this is now what my dreams are, right? And I have a clear why. So these guys are trying to here, I'm trying Tier 1, or I'm gonna end up in Tier 2. But my goal is to play collegiate hockey, right? What we're talking about with most of the people that we're talking about in junior hockey is not going to be to play in the NHL. They may say, I want to play in the NHL.
Right.
But if we're
Right.
really saying, like, no, I really want to play D1, when you talk to a 12-year-old, they're going to say, I want to play in the NHL. When they're talking to a 17, 18, 19-year-old, they're
Right.
going to play D1
Right.
because their goals have been, focused, or some doors have closed,
Yep.
or maybe they want to play minor pro. Maybe they want to go to Sweden and play one of these things.
Sure.
But okay, uh, now, which is it's within their reach. I'm playing junior. I'm playing junior A. I'm playing Tier 2, and that is the path. I'm still on the path to that. Where do you go next when it comes to goals? Because okay, if that's your goal and you can answer, well, why is that important to you? Do you now break it down into smaller goals, or do you go straight into strategy of how are we going to get there?
once I mentioned in the original calls, I just asked them what's their why, what's your dream goal, what do you want to do with it? I don't really talk about it very much after that, because I'll tell you why. I really think goals, I don't know if I should say this, I'm saying it. I think goals are overrated. I
Okay.
really do. Because I think they're so cliche. They feel almost token in a way. I am less interested in your goals, more about what you do every day. I am way more interested in whether or not you have high performance habits.
So
And
the
there's,
action, right?
yeah, well, the quote that I give them is be, do, have. Be willing to do what it takes to have what you want. So start at the end. What do you want? Okay, nice. And then I'm like, that is not special. Every hockey player wants that. So, okay, good. This is what you want. Then I go here. What will it take? And I help them get complete clarity on what it's going to take. And then here's the next question. And I tell them this, you better answer this truthfully. Are you willing?
Mhm.
Are you willing? Because to get what you want is so damn hard. The funnel gets narrower, it does not get wider. And if everyone wants the exact same thing that you want, how come so few get it? And what are you going to do to make sure you're one of those few? So that's where I spend all my time on, what are you going to do? And then they tell me, and then I also go, whoop, whoop. How's that special? How's that any different than what everyone else is doing? So I try and help them take action that separates themselves from the crowd.
So let
And
me
mental training is one of the separators.
yeah. So let me flip this to different viewpoints or view a different uh, point of view. Now you are the coach, and you've been through these processes multiple times, and you're evaluating players. You're not coaching them yet. You're evaluating players. You're scouting players. Um, because I'm assuming that there's also this point about, coachability and yes, once they become a player, I now have someone to work with. So I would imagine that you have different categories of, do they have the talent and the skills and are they coachable? But um whether it's basketball or let's just use what's right there close to your comfort zone, and I would assume that it translates to hockey. Because these guys we're talking about, 17, 18, 19-year-olds, are going to go to main camps. They're now being evaluated by often the head coach, the general manager, the director of scouting, and assistant coaches. And we're now going to this tryout, and there's 200 kids there, right? On 8 teams. And it's done over 3 days. So it's not just one game, it's not one shot. It's not an Eminem song here, but one opportunity. Um, but we have over this weekend now. You're gonna have the ability to really showcase who you are. But you're now up in the stands and take your old basketball hat on and say, I'm evaluating this. What are you looking for in general, and what are you looking for specifically?
I was just at one of those ice sessions for the camp that you're exactly talking about in hockey. They had like 100 and I don't know, there were 6 teams or whatever, and
Yep.
they were all, they all get their ice times. And I went to watch one of them. And I remembered thinking afterwards, man, if I was the coach, if I was one of these scouts, I'd be like, I don't think I would have taken any of them. And now but that's how I was watching it. And then I asked myself why, and I'm like, because they were all vanilla.
Yeah.
Like it's just that everybody looked the same. And you know what the ones who stood out to me the most? The puck hogs. and the ones who took a longer shift than they should have.
So
And
you're seeing the negatives.
yeah, I'm like, I'm not choosing those guys. But everybody else is freaking just vanilla. I'm like, where's the chocolate chip mint? Where's the rocky road? Like, and then I'm like, you all just look like little robots and
Okay.
puppets skating around doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. And then on the last, it was the last or the second last shift. It was almost near the end of the, because they're just scrimmaging. The end of the second last shift, this one athlete, again, vanilla the entire time I've been watching, and I'm like, oh my gosh, vanilla, vanilla. And then this one athlete got the puck over on the left wing, being chased, and in 3 strides, the separation went from this to, in 3 strides. I can't remember if he scored or if he passed and it resulted in a goal. I can't remember. But I thought to myself, why haven't you been doing that thing? Because that was the only thing that caught my eye from all the vanilla. And
Okay.
I'm like, but I saw him do it one time. So what is my point? When you're in a goldfish bowl full of 200 goldfish, put on your damn shark fin.
Yeah.
Find a way to stand out from the 200 goldfish.
And why? But you would imagine that that would be kind of, that's what everybody's being told. So let me throw this one thing at, if you've never been there, right? So you don't have the experience of have been there, so you don't have a reference point of, oh, I remember that last time and I did or didn't do whatever, right? So this is now my first time, so that may be a challenge. But I would imagine that all of these players are being told by their coach or by their mentor or by their parents or by themselves, I better stand out, hit or be hit, try to do something like, right? But then they fold into what's comfortable. So why does that happen? Is it because they just don't, it's so unfamiliar and this is a completely different game, or why is it?
Comes back to the 3 things we're most afraid of: failure, success, and what people think. So you remember the athlete that I said about, like, in 3 strides, the separation just went boom. What if that athlete, before he had gone to this camp, before he'd stepped on the ice, had asked himself, what's something I think that might be a separator for me? And if we don't know what that word means, what's my number 1 strength? And how will I showcase it? How will I measure it? What's my proof and evidence that I did this thing to help me be chocolate chip mint? But then something happens, doesn't it? I'm really good at this thing. These are my strengths. And in practices, I just kill it. And now here I am in this goldfish bowl with 200 other goldfish and all these scouts watching. And I become a little minnow. I'm not even a goldfish anymore. I become a little minnow. That's what I think is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because that's where fear shows up. What if I try and use my strength and it doesn't work? What will they think? What if now I get cut? What if they think I'm a loser? What if they think I'm not good enough? And so what we revert to when the voice of fear has the microphone, what we revert to is we play it safe. And what is safe? Vanilla.
Yeah.
One of 200 goldfish. That is what safe looks like.
Which leads you to failure. Or in their mind, that is not, I mean, if you're trying to make the team, you're not going to make the team, which is failure. But
Okay.
what you're saying is that the emotion is stronger because that's
Yes. The emotion, yes. Again, and this is what I find, if athletes would pay more attention to what's the thought or the feeling that's stopping me from doing what I'm great at. Because it's not like all of a sudden you became worse at the skill. You didn't become worse. It was a thought or a feeling that holds you back from showcasing it. And it's always a fear, right? The underlying feeling is a fear. Fear of what? Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of what someone's going to think. So it is just easier to play it safe and blend in.
So I would imagine too, though, that when you're in that moment, and what's nice in hockey is that a game is broken down into periods, and periods are broken down into shifts.
Right.
And you have two physically different geographical locations where you play the game. One is going to be on the ice. The other part is when you're on the bench. And when you're on the bench, you have the ability, so I'm going to use the word reset. But you have, since it's broken down into game period shifts, if you have a bad shift, that's only bad if you keep on doing it. But unfortunately, you have a lot of players that have a bad shift and that cascades or that gets magnified into a worse one because they look back at the last one and that was bad. So now my confidence is low, or I get into this fear mode that you were talking about, and then gripping the stick too tight and I don't stick out. I don't do the things that my game plan said that I was going to do. So how do you, I want to go into this area. How do you hit the reset button after the bad shift? Because for you to have, 26 excellent shift is just not going to happen.
Right.
You're going to have some bad ones. And within that shift, you may be on the ice for 45 seconds. You may not have touched the puck at all, or you may have thrown a pizza up the middle, but then you recover, So within the shift, but more importantly, how do you hit the reset button in between shifts?
Think about what happens, what's going on in our minds when we have a bad shift. We're pissed off, we're mad, we're blaming, or maybe we're mad at ref, whatever it is.
The emotions, right? The anger.
Emotions.
Yeah.
What if we could do this? Get curious, not furious. Curious means you come off off after a bad shift and you go, that was interesting. If I had a do-over, what would I do differently? Because I'm getting a do-over in about 90 seconds. I'm going to have a do-over. Be like, wow, what did that bad shift show me? What did that turnover show me? What did that shot? I should have hit the net and I missed it. What did that show me? That's what curious is. Curious puts us into rational thinking. Furious puts us into emotional. And when we are emotional, we're not good thinkers. We're not good thinkers when we're emotional, but we can be really good thinkers when we are rational. So,
but the experienced person or the
yep.
player, the experienced player that have been there in that battle and that have had, so let's go into this now and wrapping it up. And that is, so what's your advice how do you practice this? Because if you were a complete rookie in emotional intelligence and the ability to impact and practice these things, how do you build this in to your routine? How do you create habits in recognition, in training, and these type of things?
I believe that the most important thing that I teach athletes is how to handle their negative emotions. Because think about how many things that happen in our sport that bring negative emotions. And the negative emotions puts us into self-judgment. Okay, so if we agree on that, and then if we say that also usually makes us play worse,
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, Shawnee, yay, thank you, Captain Obvious.
Yeah.
What's the solution? Well, I talked about curious, not furious, but there's another really good one. I don't think your listeners are going to like it at all. Too bad. Here it is. The opposite of judgment is one of my favorite F words. Forgiveness. Forgiveness.
You're getting all touchy-feely here.
Darn right. This is emotional intelligence. Okay, I'm going to use myself as an example. So I'm an adult athlete now. I'm playing pickleball. I've gotten good. I have bring in my competitive nature. I bring in all my old habits. When I make a mistake, and I have a weapon, it's called a pickleball paddle. When I make a mistake, this was me not like a year ago.
Yeah.
And I'd smack myself on the leg with my paddle. I would F-bomb, and I'd be like, what are you doing? Like the typical, because that was my habit as an athlete, right? Everything was beat myself up, throw myself under the bus, because I take great pride in being hard on myself.
Yes.
And I wear it as a badge of honor.
That's your identity.
Look at me being hard on myself. Did you see how hard I hit myself with my paddle? See how pissed off I am? That's the ego speaking. And what's the job of the ego? To be right. Well, you know what? I'm learning to manage my ego better. And this is what I do now. I'll give you an example. Remember how I said I used to smack myself with my paddle and F-bomb all over the place? This is what I do now. In pickleball, a difficult shot from the baseline is a good third shot drop. It's hard. It's a hard shot. I often hit it into the net. And then I used to hit myself an F-bomb. Here's what I do now. That's okay. Hit it higher next time. If people don't like the word forgiveness because, ooh, it's touchy-feely, we don't do that in hockey, then don't use the word. I don't care what word you use, but I'm going to tell you right now, when I say to myself, that's okay, and then I give myself a coaching tip, do you think it improves my play or makes me play worse? I start kicking ass when I do the opposite, hit myself with my paddle, F-bomb myself, throw myself under the bus. I play worse. So what if we just started saying this? Mistakes are normal. Losing is normal. Failure is normal. Missing the net is normal. Turning the puck over is normal. If every one of those things are normal, I didn't do any of them on purpose. Why can't I say to myself, that's okay, and then offer myself a solution?
So when you go back to you're evaluating these kids, or you're now the coach, can you spot is a high emotional intelligence a observable behavior?
Yes.
What are some
I see
ways?
mostly it's low.
Yeah. So what are
It's
some
low emotional intelligence that I see.
Yeah, what are you seeing on the ice that are signs of low emotional intelligence that makes the coach say, I'm sure you've been there where you're like, not sure, got a good shot, got some skill here, but low emotional intelligence. I'm going to pick this player over that because of it. It's real, right?
Yes. Sure. I'll say this. Here's what I was going to say. I don't think coaches have emotional intelligence. So how are they supposed to recognize it in players? And I put myself right there because I was a professional coach for 25 years. My emotional intelligence on a scale of 10 on a good day was probably a 3, but I didn't know it because emotional intelligence was never part of the coach education path. I didn't even have those words in my vocabulary. So I think what coaches are actually looking for is how does a player respond when they make a mistake?
Yes. Are they
That's what,
slamming? Are they slamming their stick?
right,
Are they hitting themselves with a pickleball paddle
right,
and start using the body language of shoulders down, or
right,
are they almost like they're hitting the reset button and they're coming out shoulders back,
right,
and the winning eye, I'm going harder instead of cowering,
right.
right? Is
But
that because I can
yes,
tell that that's observable, right?
yes. So I would call that, let's call that mistake response. Athletes that have great mistake response, they're great at managing the feelings that come when they make a mistake. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So there's mistake response. I also think another part of emotional intelligence that coaches look for, but I don't think coaches are consciously using that word, is where's the athlete that's willing to take a risk
Yeah.
and try something a little bit out of the box, a little bit risky. There's an emotional intelligence that also comes with that, because to take a risk requires me to silence the voice of self-doubt and step into my courage. That's also emotional intelligence, right? Handle my fears. How do I bounce back when I make a mistake? I think coaches are looking for this all the time, but I'm not sure most coaches would use the term emotional intelligence or the term self-awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's certainly interesting, and I don't know why, and this is why I'm putting some focus on it. Actually, it originated. Someone posted on, I don't know, I think I released an episode and somebody posted a question on, hey, you ought to talk about this subject. So I made it a mission to talk about it more than just um you know highlighting off ice workouts, which I've done. We've talked about strength and conditioning and these type of things, and they're important. Stretching, injury
Yes.
prevention, and these type of
Yeah.
things. So let's segue and round this out. How do people? Because I'm you know since you and I've got connected, this is what you do. You've now turned into a focus for you, not to be a full-time coach for a team anymore, but a team that consists of multiple entities, including some of our listeners. How do they get in touch with you? And what is it that you would say why they should contact you, or, that if they're curious?
A good way to find me is my website, ShawneeHarlee.com. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle is Shawnee Harlee. You can find me on Facebook, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. And here's what I would say to your listeners: don't contact me unless you're willing to do heart work. Why heart work? Because that's where the truth is, and the truth will set you free.
And when you said heart work, and not is not necessarily hard work.
Heart, Heart, heart work.
That's great. That's great. Well, two things, and then we'll wrap it up. We have a question that we always ask. You met yourself at 17, and things that you know now that you didn't know back then. What would you say? What advice would you give yourself? You met yourself at 17. You're now the mentor of yourself. What would you tell yourself at 17?
I would ask myself the question when I was 17: what's your deepest fear?
Yeah. Awesome. I think it ties in so well. All right. Last thing, we have a partnership with targetaid.com, which is a Swedish company in Stockholm that we've been partnered with for about a year, and they do a phenomenal job in fundraising for nonprofit and for youth organizations. And one of the segments, we have a little we have a little spot on Target Aid's platform under Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast, and each one of our guests get to pick the team of my heart. So a little bit different because you're not in Sweden, but if you were going to say, from a hockey perspective, which team is the closest to your heart?
Well, I lived in Calgary for 20 years. So the Calgary Flames were always there, which makes it more difficult to cheer for the Oilers. But then the other side of me is like, well, at least it's a Canadian team.
That's right.
So the Flames.
All right. Awesome. We'll make sure that we are under. So you're going to have a spot on there, and the team of your heart is Calgary Flames. We'll see if we can get Calgary Flames to be part of Target Aid as a Target Aid focus. But thank you so much for. It's been riveting to kind of talk about these things, and we'll see where this leads. Hopefully, we can spurn some conversation. The goal is to educate and inform, not just about Swedish junior hockey, but it's really it's a segment within junior hockey about mental toughness training that I wanted to highlight. And you're certainly an expert that have given us a lot of things to think about. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.